I remember, although there's a fair bit I wish I didn't. In order to really communicate my thoughts on Final Fantasy XIV, it's important to understand what I was wanting from it. For that, come with me on a brief side journey, if you will. Not too horribly long after I relocated to the United States, Final Fantasy XI was released. It was my first MMORPG and it really stuck with me. From the very beginning, when my character walked through the gates of Sandoria, I was hooked. Well, the game's dated now, being 11 years old, and it certainly has its issues, not least of which being that it doesn't so much have a learning curve as a learning cliff. Of course, some of those issues could be fun. Anyone who remembers standing guard for trained goblin smithies at the entrance to Kazam knows that. But what sucked me in was the story, the world. I loved the characters, loved how the world felt so busy and alive. Bounced around a few link shells until I settled in the Cheapskinks, where I learned afresh it was truly possible to forge genuine friendships with people you've never met face to face. In fact, one of my biggest life regrets remains losing contact with one of them after a few horrible mistakes on my part. I still miss you, Zav. Anyway, I discovered roleplay, and the next few years of my life were lost as the real adventures of Captain Tyriont Gaidal began. Merging the wide, expansive world of Vana'diel with my own personal story was an amazing experience. I met wonderful friends, and we forged truly memorable stories. Tyrion's story grew as he became a knight under Sir Tyrion Zalorius, then abandoned that to follow his true calling as a pirate. He had a controversial romance with the Honourable Ndinka Shinoy, did incredibly stupid things with the one and only John J.J. Spiegel, formed a friendship that would eventually span several games with Renee Scarwind, got dragged around the world by Rayna Flahal, and many more adventures besides. As expansions came out, we explored new areas with a sense of awe and wonderment, and a few hiccups, such as when Dwyer and I were scouting out Atua Chasm and I decided it would be a fantastic idea to walk up and poke Tiamat. Tiamat disagreed quite strongly, with her foot on top of my head. Not long ago, while recording an episode of the podcast I work on, I was asked what my biggest gaming accomplishment was. My response was beating the final Chains of Promethea mission with my static party, having roleplayed it along the way. It was a great experience. I wanted all of that. I wanted that feeling of community, of taking this world and making it our own, to explore, to be taken in, and to forge new stories. At first I felt like I had that. I didn't get to participate in the closed beta, instead joining an open. The cry that so many had come to mock after hearing it 5 billion times was new and accurate for me. Limsa Laminsa, sight for me sore eyes. It truly was. I'd been soaking up every drop of information I could get, and now I was here. The moment the Final Fantasy XIV version of Ty stepped off the ship, I knew he was alive in more of a way than he'd ever been before. Final Fantasy XI's very limited character creator had resulted in a somewhat generic experience, but this was Ty the way he was in my mind, and I loved it. I spent hours just running around Limsa Laminsa, taking it all in. It was beautiful, the ocean city I'd hoped it was. I met Badaron, who won me over with his speech patterns. I saw a goblin looking just like they did in Final Fantasy XI. I ran around, explored the Marauders Guild, met the fellow pirates. Then I stepped outside. It was very empty. A lot of sheep. I gradually explored, finding a few basic camps. Not much really beyond that. Well, alright, it's still beta after all. They'll add more in later. I explored more along with a few friends. Well, the world was certainly beautiful, if, again, empty. By the end of beta, I'd been to the Gates of Ishgard and wondered when we get to go explore that. That was a cool-looking city. The game launched, and I picked up my Collector's Edition on day one, excited to see what had changed since the beta. Turned out, not all that much. The world still felt empty, felt dead. I explored the world, finding that in a rather unfortunate turn of events there was a compatibility issue between the game and my video card that resulted in Gridania's textures getting inverted after about 5 minutes, rendering that entire city and surrounding areas completely unplayable. I appreciated the improvements they made over Final Fantasy XI, though I wish there were a great deal more. At least there was the tutorial, right? I thought that was a great thing until I created an alt who started as a crafter. Allow me to quickly explain how the combat tutorial worked. In the Limson opening, the ship you were on was attacked, and you wound up fighting giant jellyfish. Well, this was great if you were a combat class. As a crafter, you still get that entire sequence, but now you have to fight using the only combat move available to you, throwing a small rock. Being neither a halfling nor a hobbit, this proved immensely ineffectual as you sat there plinking away doing your negligible damage until the NPC in the scene with you got bored and smashed it into oblivion. Not exactly the great awe-inspiring opening I wanted to see, and I can only imagine how turned off people who started their first character as a crafter must have been. Once I got in, I tried out crafting. Tried being the operative term. I was highly confused by this new crafting system, and while I loved the concept of a more active crafting process, a concept is still all it was. The system was horribly unclear, and there was wildly conflicting theories around as to what the colours of your little glowy synth ball meant. I tried out multiple different craft professions, all with the same results. And then I turned my hand to gathering, which was equally unclear. I was asked to shift my target up and down a tree trunk in a strange little game of hot and cold, which felt designed to obscure things more than anything else. But it was all okay, I told myself. Now, Square had admitted that the game wasn't up to par, and even agreed not to charge the subscription fee until they felt it was worth paying for, a move which won a lot of good faith from me. So I stuck around, got some roleplay going, and had some fun while waiting for the game to meet my expectations. It never did. Eventually I just got bored and stopped playing. All the roleplay sure had been fun, but without the game behind it, things still felt kind of off, kind of dead. I popped my head back in later down the line after I heard of the addition of things like materia in the job system, but I never really experienced any of it. The core was still dull to me, and so I couldn't slog through to reach the newer, apparently more interesting stuff. The real death knell for my interest in Final Fantasy XIV was the release of Guild Wars 2. A living world with an engaging combat system, it was much more what I was looking for. I still play that to this day. When I heard that Square were relaunching Final Fantasy XIV, I was impressed. It was a ballsy move to admit their mistakes and take on the substantial financial cost of rebuilding things from the ground up. But I'd been burned before, and I was admittedly fairly skeptical. A friend of mine was in Phase 2, and he talked a lot about the massive improvements they'd made. I was doubtful, but my interest was certainly piqued. I read the interviews with Yoshi P and liked his enthusiasm, the way he seemed to just get it. Then I wound up getting into the Phase 3 beta, and I was blown away. I remade Ty, the new character creator, though some of the options had changed, and I really wasn't happy with the way he looked, but didn't care all that much since I knew I wasn't keeping him. I started this time as an archer in Gridania, a city I could actually explore this time around. It was so much easier to get around via the Aetheryte. My class quests were cleverly designed to gradually teach me how to play the class without bashing me over the head with it. The story felt engaging, though self-same class quests felt like things were tailored more directly to my character. The small additions, like the background noises when you're around a large group of people, the NPCs actively moving and conversing with each other. The world felt alive. That first phase lasted only a few days, but my appetite was definitely whet. Next time I got to play, we had the option to import our 1.0 legacy characters, which I gleefully did. Tyriont arrived in Limsa for the second time with a much greater feeling of excitement than the first. This time, instead of running around and exploring the city for hours, I ran outside to explore out there. I found Aleport, now a bustling port hub, much bigger than it had been originally. I saw the changes to the world since Bahamut threw a temper tantrum and felt that this was a world really just starting to recover from the terrible event. I reconnected with a few people from my former shell who were still around thanks to the shell being kept active in the transition. Tried out the new crafting system and fell instantly in love with it. It was clear! It made sense! Above all else, I truly felt like what I was doing had an impact on the quality of my final product. Oh, what's that? Actual quests for crafters? Awesome! Most of my time was spent exploring, a testament to the changes right there. Loved Costa del Sol, where Ty, being the flirty pirate rogue he is, will probably be spending a lot of time come launch. But towards the end, I teamed up with Renee and Zaya to run the dungeons. Holy hell! They were extremely well thought out, increasing in complexity to help a novice player learn their tricks while still being challenging. What stands out most to me is the fight against the Icarus Eye down in Copperbell, which involved a style of fight mechanic that felt unique and satisfying. When we were down to the final 8 smaller oozes, our Dragoon friend, who we'd picked up earlier, had gone down to a bomb, and the oozes had eaten Ren, leaving just Zaya as our conjurer and myself standing. I was really glad I was playing Rorder at that point. Busted out the AoE moves, took them down. Pulling that fight off gave a huge feeling of satisfaction. It wasn't just like we were sitting there punching things or, auto-engaging and hitting a weapon skill every once in a while, like Final Fantasy XI had occasionally felt. This felt active, felt engaging, and felt that we had really accomplished something when we got that victory. I spent the last night of the beta playing around with the character creator a little more, making new versions of Ty's crew. My experiences in that beta phase, combined with my return to the roleplay community, have made me excited for this game in a way I've not felt in a very long time. Captain Ty is back. Based on what I've seen so far, he ain't going anywhere this time.